You keep asking why your life feels scattered, why progress comes in brief flashes and then disappears, why effort doesn't seem to compound. And deep down, you already know the answer. It isn't luck, it isn't talent, it isn't opportunity, it is discipline. Not the dramatic kind, not punishment, but the quiet structure that holds your life together when motivation fades. Look at the shape of your days, not your intentions, not your plans, your days. What you do when no one is watching. What you repeat when you are tired. What you allow to slip because it feels small. That is the architecture of your future. Discipline is not an accessory to life. It is the frame that determines whether anything meaningful can stand. You don't lack desire. You lack alignment. Desire is easy. Anyone can want a better body, a sharper mind, a calmer life. Discipline is what translates wanting into becoming. Without it, desire rots into frustration. With it, even modest effort compounds into something unrecognizable over time. Most men misunderstand discipline. They imagine it as force, as self-denial, as living in constant resistance. But discipline is not violence against yourself. It is agreement. An agreement between who you are now and who you refuse to betray. It is choosing the long term over the comfortable again and again until the choice no longer feels heroic. It just feels normal. Notice how undisciplined living fragments your attention. You wake up reactive. Your phone decides your mood before you do. Small indulgences steal hours. Excuses feel reasonable in the moment and heavy at night. This is not freedom. This is drift. And drift always moves downward, even when it feels effortless. Discipline is what stops the drift. It is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as routines that don't need applause, as boundaries that don't require explanation, as standards you hold, even when no reward is immediate. Discipline creates a stable inner climate, and from that stability, clarity grows. When you are disciplined, your mind quiets, not because life becomes easy, but because your decisions become fewer. You no longer negotiate with yourself about the basics. You already decided. You already chose who you are. That removes friction. That conserves energy. That is why disciplined men appear calm. They are not calm by nature. They are calm by design. You want confidence, but confidence does not come from affirmation. It comes from evidence. From keeping promises to yourself when breaking them would be convenient. Each time you do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, you deposit trust into your own system. Over time, that trust becomes unshakable. Think about the moments you respect others most. It is not when they talk, it is when they act consistently. When their words align with their behavior. Discipline creates that alignment internally, and when a man is aligned inside, the world responds differently, not because he demands respect, but because his presence carries weight. Without discipline, life feels like negotiation. Every task is optional, every discomfort is avoidable. That softness accumulates. It dulls your edge. It teaches your nervous system that resistance is dangerous. Over time, even small challenges feel overwhelming. Discipline reverses this. It teaches your body and mind that discomfort is survivable, often necessary, sometimes beneficial. You don't need extreme discipline. You need reliable discipline, the kind that shows up on ordinary days, the kind that does not depend on mood. Mood is weather, discipline is climate. One changes constantly, the other shapes everything beneath it. Observe how disciplined action simplifies life. You sleep better because your body expects rest. You eat better because hunger is no longer confused with impulse. You work better because your mind associates certain hours with focus. This is not rigidity. This is rhythm. And rhythm is what allows intensity without burnout. Many men wait to feel ready. Ready is a feeling that rarely arrives. Discipline does not wait. It moves first. Feeling follows action, not the other way around. When you act with discipline, your emotions reorganize around your behavior. Motivation becomes a byproduct, not a prerequisite. There is a reason ancient thinkers emphasize self-mastery above all else. A man who cannot govern himself will always be governed by something else, by pleasure, by fear, by other people's expectations. Discipline is sovereignty. It is choosing to rule your inner world so the outer world does not rule you. This is not about becoming cold. Discipline does not remove emotion. It prevents emotion from steering the ship. You still feel desire, anger, fatigue, doubt, but they become information, not commands. You listen to them without obeying them blindly. That separation is power. Notice how life begins to feel intentional when discipline is present. Your days have shape. Your goals have gravity. Even setbacks feel instructive rather than personal. You stop asking why things happen to you and start asking how to respond well. That shift changes everything. Discipline also reveals what actually matters. When your time and energy are structured, distractions lose their appeal. You become selective, not because you are deprived, but because you are focused. You begin to protect your attention the way a man protects something valuable, because it is. You might fear that discipline will make life smaller. In truth, it makes life deeper. It removes noise so meaning can surface. It creates space for excellence, not perfection. Excellence is simply doing the next right thing, consistently, without drama. Look closely at the life you want. Strip away the fantasy. What remains are habits, repeated actions, daily choices. Discipline is not separate from that life. It is the mechanism that builds it quietly, day after day, until one morning you realize you are no longer chasing it. You are living inside it. This realization is uncomfortable at first, because it removes excuses. It places responsibility exactly where it belongs, with you. But it is also liberating, because it means the path forward is not mysterious. It is demanding, but it is clear. Discipline does not promise ease. It promises direction, and direction is what most men are missing. When you know where you're going and you trust yourself to keep moving, even slowly, anxiety loosens its grip. You are no longer at war with yourself. The life you want is not created by intensity. It is created by continuity, by showing up again after a bad day, by returning to the path without punishment or self-pity. Discipline allows that return. It is patient. It does not require perfection, only honesty. If you understand this, truly understand it, you stop looking for shortcuts. You stop bargaining with reality. You accept the quiet work. And in that acceptance, something steadies inside you. That steadiness is the beginning. You begin to notice something once discipline takes root. The world does not change immediately, but your relationship to it does. Situations that once felt chaotic now feel manageable. Not because they are smaller, but because you are steadier. Discipline does not remove pressure. It teaches you how to stand inside it without collapsing. Most people live at the mercy of impulse. They confuse reaction with authenticity. They think doing whatever they feel in the moment is freedom. But that kind of freedom is fragile. It depends on comfort. The moment discomfort appears, they retreat. Discipline creates a different kind of freedom. The freedom to act even when the moment is hostile. Look closely at resistance. Not external resistance, internal resistance. The moment before you do what you know you should do. The hesitation, the rationalization, the quiet urge to delay. That moment is where lives are shaped. Discipline is not the act itself. It is the decision made in that silent space. Most men lose there, not because they are weak, but because they have never trained that moment. They wait for certainty, for confidence, for energy. Discipline teaches you that none of those are required. Only commitment is. You move first. The rest aligns later. When discipline becomes part of your identity, you stop asking whether you feel like doing something. That question loses relevance. You ask a different one. Is this aligned with the man I am becoming? If the answer is yes, action follows. No argument, no drama. This simplicity is powerful. Notice how this removes mental noise. Decision fatigue disappears. You are no longer debating every small choice. You already decided your standards. Standards are discipline made visible. They define what is acceptable without negotiation. And once standards are set, behavior follows naturally. Discipline also exposes illusions. You realize how often you blamed circumstances for outcomes that were actually shaped by consistency. You stop romanticizing potential. Potential without discipline is harmless. It never threatens mediocrity. Only disciplined action does. There is a quiet dignity that comes from self-command. You begin to trust yourself in uncertainty. You know that even if things go wrong, you will respond with structure rather than panic. That trust is earned, not assumed. It is built through repetition. Discipline does not mean rigid control over every detail. It means control over the essentials: sleep, movement, focus, speech, effort. These are the levers that shape everything else. When they are neglected, life becomes reactive. When they are governed, life becomes deliberate. You may notice resistance from others as you become more disciplined, not open resistance, subtle discomfort. Your consistency reminds them of their inconsistency. Your boundaries challenge their expectations. This is not your problem to solve. Discipline often requires standing alone without explanation. Silence becomes important here. You stop advertising your intentions. You let results speak. Discipline prefers privacy. It does not need validation. In fact, external validation weakens it. The work becomes about alignment, not approval. Pay attention to how discipline affects your emotional life. Emotions still come, but they pass more cleanly. You do not cling to highs or dramatize lows. Because your actions are stable, your emotional range becomes manageable. This is not suppression, it is proportion. A disciplined man does not overreact because his life is not built on impulse. When something unexpected happens, he adjusts without losing direction. Direction is the anchor. Discipline keeps it fixed. You also begin to understand patience differently. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active endurance. It is continuing to act correctly while outcomes lag behind effort. Discipline allows patience because it removes the need for immediate reward. You are satisfied with execution. This is where most people fail. They want feedback too quickly. They measure too often. Discipline accepts delay. It understands that growth is asymmetrical. That results arrive suddenly after long periods of invisibility. Without discipline, those invisible periods feel unbearable. With discipline, they feel normal. Observe how your self-respect changes. You no longer inflate your worth through comparison. You measure yourself against your own code. Did you do what you said you would do? That becomes the metric. It is simple. It is unforgiving. It is fair. This internal metric stabilizes your identity. You are no longer defined by praise or criticism. You are defined by adherence to principle. That makes you harder to manipulate, harder to distract, harder to derail. Discipline also clarifies ambition. You stop chasing everything. You choose carefully, because discipline requires energy and energy is finite. You invest it where it matters. This selectivity creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline. The cycle strengthens. You begin to see discipline not as sacrifice but as filtration. It removes what is unnecessary so what matters can breathe. Many distractions lose appeal not because you forbid them, but because they no longer fit the structure of your life. Structure is often misunderstood as limitation. In reality, structure is what allows intensity without collapse. Athletes understand this. Artists understand this. Warriors understood this long before modern life softened the edges. Discipline creates a container strong enough to hold force. Without that container, force spills everywhere. You burn energy without progress. You mistake busyness for movement. Discipline corrects this. It channels effort. It makes small actions meaningful because they are connected to a larger direction. Pay attention to how discipline affects your speech. You speak less, more precisely. You do not waste words explaining yourself. This restraint is not emptiness. It is confidence. You trust your actions to communicate what matters. As discipline deepens, you stop needing to feel exceptional. You are content being consistent. This is a critical shift. Exceptional moments are rare. Consistent behavior is available daily. Discipline chooses availability over fantasy. There will be days when discipline feels heavy, when routine feels dull. This is where understanding matters. Discipline is not meant to entertain you. It is meant to stabilize you. You do not abandon stability because it lacks novelty. In those moments, you do not look for inspiration. You return to principle. You act because it is correct, not because it is exciting. This is maturity, and maturity is what sustains long-term strength. The more disciplined you become, the less dramatic your inner life needs to be. You are not fighting yourself constantly. Conflict reduces. Energy consolidates. This consolidation is power. You begin to move through life with a sense of inevitability, not arrogance, certainty. You know that if you continue, results will follow, not immediately, not predictably, but eventually. And that is enough. This is what discipline quietly builds. Not just outcomes, but a man who can be trusted with outcomes. There comes a point where discipline stops feeling like something you apply and starts feeling like something you are. Not because it becomes effortless, but because resistance no longer surprises you. You expect it. You account for it. You do not interpret it as a sign to stop. This is where most transformations either stabilize or collapse. Up to this point, discipline may have felt like a tool, something you used to fix problems, to regain control, to move forward. But tools can be set down. Identity cannot. When discipline becomes identity, you no longer ask how to stay consistent. You ask how to act correctly within your consistency. This distinction matters. A man who relies on discipline as a tool will abandon it under pressure. A man who lives discipline as identity adjusts under pressure. He bends without breaking. He adapts without dissolving. His structure remains intact, even when circumstances shift. At this stage, discipline is no longer about productivity. It is about character. You start to see that the life you want was never a distant reward. It was a byproduct. The real outcome was becoming someone capable of sustaining that life without self-sabotage. Many people achieve what they want briefly and then lose it. Not because the world took it back, but because they were not built to hold it. Discipline builds capacity, capacity to endure boredom, capacity to endure delay, capacity to endure silence, capacity to endure responsibility. These are not glamorous strengths, but they are decisive ones. Without them, success becomes a burden. With them, even failure becomes instructive. You may notice that your desires change, not in intensity, but in quality. You are less attracted to outcomes that promise status and more interested in conditions that preserve clarity. You choose environments that support your discipline rather than constantly testing it. This is wisdom, not avoidance. The disciplined man does not live in constant opposition to temptation. He designs his life so temptation has less access. This is not weakness, it is intelligence. You do not prove strength by standing in fire unnecessarily. Over time, discipline sharpens your sense of proportion. You stop making everything personal. Setbacks are no longer insults. Criticism is no longer an attack. Praise is no longer nourishment. You respond to events based on their relevance, not their emotional charge. This emotional regulation is one of discipline's quiet gifts. It does not numb you, it calibrates you. You feel what is appropriate, when it is appropriate, for as long as it is appropriate. nothing more. This is why disciplined men appear grounded. Their reactions match reality, not their ego. You also begin to see how rare this state is. Most people live in oscillation, intense effort followed by collapse, confidence followed by doubt, vision followed by distraction. Discipline smooths these oscillations. It creates continuity. Continuity is underestimated, but continuity is what allows growth to compound invisibly. Day after day, correct action stacks. The changes are subtle until they are not. One day you realize you handle situations that used to overwhelm you with ease. Another day you notice you no longer need external pressure to do what needs to be done. Another day you recognize that your internal dialogue is calmer, less argumentative. These are signs that discipline has done its deeper work. At this level, discipline is no longer about forcing yourself forward. It is about maintaining coherence, keeping your values, actions, and direction aligned even when life becomes complex. Especially when it becomes complex, you stop romanticizing chaos. You stop equating struggle with meaning. Discipline teaches you that meaning comes from alignment, not suffering. Suffering may occur, but it is not the goal. This clarity changes how you approach effort. You no longer push recklessly. You pace yourself. You understand that sustainability is strength. Burnout is not proof of dedication. It is proof of poor structure. A disciplined life has margins, time to recover, space to think, silence to recalibrate. These margins are not laziness. They are maintenance. Without them, even strong systems fail. You also stop chasing certainty. Discipline does not require certainty. It requires direction. You move forward based on principle, not prediction. When outcomes change, you adjust course without losing momentum. This flexibility within structure is what makes discipline resilient. It is not brittle. It does not shatter when plans fail. It absorbs impact and redirects force. Eventually, you realize that discipline is not what creates the life you want. Discipline is what creates the man who can live that life well. The life itself will change. Circumstances will shift. Roles will evolve. But the internal structure remains. That is the real asset. You no longer need to constantly remind yourself of your goals. Your behavior reflects them automatically. This frees mental space. You are present, attentive, engaged. Presence is a byproduct of discipline. When you are not constantly negotiating with yourself, your attention returns to the moment. You see more clearly. You listen more fully. You act more precisely. This precision shows in your work, your relationships, your decisions. You are not rushed. You are not scattered. You move deliberately. At this point, discipline feels less like effort and more like order, and order is deeply satisfying to the human mind. It reduces anxiety because it reduces unpredictability within yourself. You know how you will respond. That knowledge is calming. It also makes you reliable to others, but more importantly, to yourself. Reliability builds trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence allows you to take on greater responsibility without fear. Responsibility stops feeling heavy when you are disciplined. It feels appropriate. You are no longer avoiding it or seeking it for validation. You accept it as part of your role. This acceptance is maturity. A disciplined man does not need to prove himself constantly. He knows who he is because his actions confirm it daily. There is no gap between self-image and behavior. That gap is where insecurity lives. When the gap closes, insecurity fades. You still have challenges. You still experience doubt. But doubt no longer paralyzes you. It informs you. You acknowledge it and proceed anyway. This is not recklessness. It is resolve. Resolve is discipline expressed over time. And this is where the original question dissolves. The question of how to create the life you want. You see now that the life you want is not built through bursts of intensity or moments of inspiration. It is built through sustained alignment, through days that look unremarkable from the outside but are internally consistent, through choices that are boring but correct, through restraint when indulgence is easy, through action when waiting would be comfortable. Discipline does not make life dramatic. It makes life stable. And stability is what allows depth, growth, and meaning to emerge naturally. When you see this clearly, you stop searching. You no longer search. You act again, without noise, without hesitation. And that steady movement, unseen, uncelebrated, is the quiet victory most men never reach.